Hello, everyone. This is your host, Andrew Pledger, and I am a survivor of Bob Jones University. And this is Beyond BJU Exposing Fundamentalism, which is a podcast that sheds light on Christian fundamentalism in the context of Bob Jones University. The show includes survivor stories from BJU and also Bob Jones affiliated ministries like Christian day schools, camps, and churches. The podcast also explores BJU's influence beyond the school and its impact on American society. I want to thank my Patreon supporters who allow me to do this work, and if you could join my Patreon, it would be greatly appreciated. The link is in the description of every episode. But if you feel that you can't do that, then I would appreciate it if you would leave a 5-star rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, because this helps other listeners like you discover the show. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I am so happy to have Elizabeth on the show today to share her experiences and part of her story of being at the Bob Jones Academy and BJU. But before we get into that, how are you doing today, Elizabeth?
I'm doing good.
That's awesome. I'm so glad that you were able to come to the place to share your story, because I know we had a practice interview. I want to make sure that you were comfortable, and I'm so glad you decided to share it. What I'm looking forward to people hearing your story is about just your mental health struggles and the lack of support you had at Bob Jones and just different instances where they failed you. I think it's such a common experience at Bob Jones that a lot of people feel a lot of shame about, or they're not able to talk about because of just I think mental health is stigmatized in general, but in Bob Jones and in fundamentalism, it's just a whole other level of being stigmatized. So I'm so glad you're coming on to talk about that. But for those who are unfamiliar with you, could you introduce yourself?
For sure. I am Elizabeth, and I am a reading tutor, also getting my degree in early childhood right now. I went to Bob Jones Academy between 2008 to 2000, and that was my junior and senior years of high school. I also went to Bob Jones University from 2010 through 2014.
Thank you so much for sharing that. But something else I want to ask before we get into the Bob Jones Academy aspect, I think this is important. An important part of your story is, I think, your family's mental health history, because at Bob Jones University and in Christian fundamentalism, it's always seen as a spiritual issue. It's never seen as something that is intergenerational or that you can struggle with or have through genetics. So whatever you're comfortable sharing about your family's mental health history.
So on my mom's side of the family, there is a lot of generational trauma and mental illness. My mom has had several mental breakdowns throughout her life. There's a lot of family trauma and abuse as well. That's kind of the background there.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And the next question I want to ask is, I know you attended Bob Jones Academy, but I know there was an incident that happened right before you attended, if you're comfortable sharing that.
For sure. So when I was 15, we moved from Round Rock, Texas, where I'd grown up, to Fayetteville, North Carolina, where my dad had gotten a job. He's a teacher in a Christian school. This was a totally new place. We didn't know anybody. My mom started having signs of a mental breakdown and a lot of paranoia. It was really scary, especially for me because I was only 15 and so dependent on my mom for everything. I look back on that time, and that little 15-year-old was a lot younger emotionally and socially. My mom ended up in a mental hospital in the fall of that year, and then again in the spring. It was the first time I'd ever been separated from her. It was really traumatic for me. And I just remember feeling like all of this was on me. I remember being so scared that something was going to happen to her and she wasn't going to be here anymore. And I didn't know what I was going to do.
Yeah, it is so traumatic to see a parent who is sick and not knowing if they're going to be okay, not able to have that support. It's like having things change so quickly. And that is something that is common with traumatic events, something that just happens too fast, too soon, too quickly, just a sudden change or something that happens. And that could just disorient, overwhelm, and cause harm. But yeah, I'm so sorry that you've experienced that. And I know I'm trying to remember from when we had talked before. I think you had been checked into a mental health facility.
Yes. When we ended up moving to Greenville, I had actually already gotten accepted into Bob Jones Academy. Right before I was supposed to start, I had a mental breakdown of my own and went to the Carolina Center. I was there for about 2 weeks and missed the first 2 weeks of school.
After you get checked out of that and you're 2 weeks late at the academy, what was that experience like going into it, and how are you treated at BJA?
Yeah, so it was a real culture shock, honestly. I didn't know anybody there. Most of the other kids there knew each other and had been going there since they were very little. I came in and I was very conservative, like I was the good girl at the time, but I wasn't myself. I didn't feel like myself because I was on a really high dosage of medication to help with my mental illness and anxiety. It felt like I was just going through the motions. Just I was trying really hard to be me, but I couldn't because the medication wouldn't let me. And so it was really hard making friends. Plus, I was just scared because there were so many rules and so many expectations, and I don't even think I understood most of them, like all the unwritten rules. I was very socially awkward as well, and it made things really difficult for me.
And was anyone at the academy aware of your mental health struggles?
Dr. White, she was the guidance counselor at the time. She would email back and forth with my dad, and he had told her a lot about what was going on. I still remember she sent an email one time to my dad that said I was acclimating pretty well, except for a few things that I needed to work on. One of them was that apparently I would rock back and forth in my seat during class. I think that was a way of me stimming now that I look back on it, but she didn't like that, I guess, and wanted me to stop doing that. The other thing was that one time I asked for prayer in a class because I was having a really difficult day with my mental health. And she said I shouldn't be asking for prayer for my mental health because it would make some of the other kids uncomfortable.
What was your parents' reaction when they read that?
My parents were not happy about it.
And did they confront the teacher about that or push back?
I don't remember. My mom might have. I know she pushed back about some things with different teachers. My mom is the kind of person that if she has a problem, she'll say something about it. So I think there were a lot of things that she would push back on.
Yeah, and then were there any other experiences you wanted to share from the academy?
I was in choir those 2 years as well. I had our choir teacher at the time. He's not there anymore. He was a very good choir teacher, but he would spend like half the time lecturing us about why rock music was wrong and also go into these very personal stories that I think kind of crossed some boundaries. I remember one time him telling us that when he was a little kid, he saw on the school bus, he saw a porn magazine and it really traumatized him. And I don't even know what point he was trying to make from that, but I just remember those kinds of things and just like saying such weird things sometimes. There was one time that stands out the most to me. He would get really stressed out around the time that we would have our choir concerts. I don't remember if this was during a dress rehearsal. I think it might have been. It was either that or it was the actual concert. We were standing backstage and there were certain places where we were supposed to stand, and we had already gone through the blocking for that. And I was right where I was supposed to be. He had told me where to stand. I was standing there. He walks past me, sees where I am, and says, "That's not where you're supposed to be." And is really angry about it. Takes me by the shoulders and physically moves me to wherever he was thought I should be, and then walks away. I was so stunned and thought, am I in trouble? Did I do something wrong? Why did that happen? That felt like it wasn't supposed to happen. And now I look back and I realize, yeah, that was not okay. But at the time, I didn't realize that it wasn't. There was one other thing that happened so my senior year of high school, we had our senior trip. We went to the wilds for the week. I had already heard the infamous Rand Hummel message in one of the meetings in chapel, but I heard it again. I got to hear that story again. At the time, I was just angry about it. Afterwards, I had been struggling a lot with my mental health, and one of the teachers from our school asked me, "How are you doing?" I knew she was just kind of asking, but I was like, I have to talk to someone. And so I said, "I'm not doing very well." We went outside and she counseled me, but I just remember the first thing she asked me was, "Are you sure that you're really a Christian? Are you sure that you're really saved?" I was like, "Yes, I am." Thankfully, I was very sure about that, at least at that point in my life. I didn't go into a lot of detail because I knew at that point that the less you said, the better. I just remember that she told me, because I talked about how it was hard for me to fit in. I didn't feel like I fit in with a lot of the girls there. I wasn't really making friends. And she said that I should lose weight and take better care of my appearance, maybe do my hair and makeup and just change my appearance. And maybe then people would accept me.
That is terrible. That is like the most shallow, awful advice you give to someone in a struggling mental health state and struggling to fit in. That's the sad thing about these high control environments is in order to be accepted, like she was basically telling you conform. And like that is sadly a part of the sexist culture and fundamentalism is there's so much put on the woman's outward appearance. And that's definitely been talked about on this podcast quite a bit. I'm so sorry. That's so heartbreaking to hear. She should have told you, this is what I see in you. You're such a good person. You're so sweet. You're so kind. You're so caring. But no, it's wow, lose weight and change how you look. That's just
Maybe then you'll fit in with the other
what?
girls.
That's terrible. That I was not expecting you to say that at all. And I'm just like, what in the yeah, that's
Yeah.
gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
And at
so
the time, I think I just took it to heart because I thought she seems like she cares because she's listening to me. I told her a little about my mental health issues and probably did tell her some of what I'd been through in Fayetteville and everything with my mom. She said that I should be careful that I didn't wear it as a badge or be proud of everything I'd been through. It's the weirdest thing.
wow.
I saw her again when I was at the university. I went to visit with a couple of friends and I saw her and I said hi and told her, "I'm doing a lot better. I'm in a really great place. I have friends now. Everything is going a lot better now. I expected that she would be like, oh, that's great. You know, like a normal person would be like, yeah, that's fantastic. I'm happy for you. No, she had a very somber face and said, just remember that it could always happen again. So just, I guess, be careful that you're not, I don't know, too happy maybe.
This person's just a total drag. Oh my God. I just don't like this person at all. Like, Debbie Downer. Thanks. I just don't. Oh my gosh. I am so sorry. That's horrible. Did you avoid her after that encounter?
I was like, at that point, I was like, this is weird. I didn't want anything to do with her.
So now having these experiences at the academy, how did that influence your feelings about attending Bob Jones University?
I don't think that I really wanted to go to the university after all of that, understandably. But, and my mom didn't really like the university at that point either. But it was, I think, because we had come there so that I could go to the university. It was like, where else are you going to go? Was kind of the attitude. And so I just went.
Like initially, like what was your freshman year like for you? What were some core experiences?
So my freshman year, I was very shy. I tried to make friends, and when I did, I definitely made some friends. In fact, I made my best friend. We're still best friends today. I was just very awkward, very shy, didn't really understand like social cues and things either. But I did make friends, and it did help bring me out of my shell a little bit. I remember feeling like living in the dorms felt a lot freer than living at home because I was still being controlled, but not on an individual level like the way that my mom was.
That feeling of some freedom, did that stay the same or did that ever change?
I think it did change. It did change later on, especially when I ended up dating. Because before that, I think I just kind of blended in.
And so, what were some other core experiences your freshman year?
So I think the biggest thing for me was because I'm a plus size girl, there was a lot of body shaming and also being dress checked for things that wouldn't have been a problem for a girl who had a different body type. I still remember being told by a hostess who came up and sat down next to me one day and was like, hey, how you doing? Just so you know, the way you're sitting right now, you can see right down your shirt. And then just got up and walked away. It's like, okay, I guess I better sit up straight. Another time I was in the library and I had my feet up, and a girl came up to me and told me that you could see right at my skirt the way I was sitting. And so after that, I was very careful to always tuck in my skirt. It wasn't enough to make sure that my skirt was at the bottom of my kneecap when I was sitting. I had to make sure that I was sitting so that you couldn't see up my skirt, I guess. It was wild. It was really weird.
There are people at Bob Jones like that who are literally looking for that just so they can get people in trouble or to be the self-righteous, annoying boge that they are, to have that power over someone else. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And I know something else you wanted to dig into with your story was this dating this guy and dealing with this toxic family. That happened sophomore year, correct?
So that happened my junior year. But
Okay. Was there anything else that you wanted to share from freshman and sophomore years at Bob
so
Jones?
in my sophomore year, I was coming out of my shell more. I made some friends. We would go off campus and listen to Taylor Swift, and that was really fun.
Oh,
Those were
how
some of my
bad. Wow.
best memories, honestly. Like going off campus, going to Barnes and Noble, listening to uncheckable music on our earbuds. Yeah, those were fun times. But so the end of my sophomore year, I met this girl who was a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun together. She seemed really sweet, and I got to know her. We became best friends, I thought, and I got to know her family. I would go to church with them on Wednesday nights, and that's how I met her brother. And so at the end of sophomore year, this girl and I were very good friends, and that whole summer I still spent time with the family. And then he somehow got my number and started texting me. At first, it was just kind of silly, like very random. And at the time, I just kind of thought as him as my friend's brother, you know, whatever. And then I started to realize that I think he likes me. I felt really insecure about not having a boyfriend. And I was like, it's my junior year. And it was like so many other girls had boyfriends. And eventually, they're going to leave, they're going to get married. I had very low self-esteem. I did not think that I was ever going to find a guy who would love me the way I was. So I just thought if someone shows interest in me, I need to give him a chance, was kind of my frame of mind at the time. He was showing interest in me. He was my best friend's brother. I thought, okay, he's kind of cute. You know that thing where it's not spoken yet, but you're kind of on a date, but also the family's all there because you can't go on a date by yourself. Yeah, we had a lot of that.
Okay, so when did it was clear that it was like a dating thing or that y'all were interested in each other?
So he finally told me that he liked me and wanted to like go on an official date and be boyfriend, girlfriend. I wasn't comfortable with that. So I told him maybe we could just kind of slow down a little bit. He ended up telling me about this other girl he had been in a relationship with who had treated him really terribly and led him on, and how she had broken his heart, very much like getting deep too quickly. And I think that made me feel like we were closer than we were. And this is all in one night, talking on the phone. At the end of that phone call, I did a really stupid thing and I said, "Love you." Then I hung up and thought, why did I do that? But from then on, we would say that we loved each other. And I was like, this is weird. I don't know why we're doing this. I barely even know him. And I would try to tell him that. I'd be like, maybe we shouldn't do that. And he was like, but I love you, Elizabeth. And he was just constantly trying to prove to me that he really cared about me. And that I remember him even saying, I would die for you, stuff like that. And we barely know each other. And my friends kind of noticed that this was happening and they were like, be careful. But I was not careful. Before I knew it, I was in a relationship with him. It just became this thing where he would kind of push me and I would go along with it for a little while. Then I would realize, wait a minute, I'm not comfortable with this and try to push back. That's when he would be upset about it. And he would frame it in a way as I wouldn't do anything that I would never push your boundaries. I would never hurt you. But then he would do things that were blatantly crossing my boundaries. And it just got worse from there.
How did the relationship end?
So it got to the point where we were in this cycle and he would get angry and yell at me. And our families hated each other. His grandma and my mom, like, they hated each other. It was really bad. His family treated me like I was the problem. I would try to comply. They would ask us not to hold hands, not to cuddle, because we would do that off campus. They would tell us to stop, and I would try to stop because I was like, I don't want to get in trouble. I want to make sure that everyone is happy with me. And then he would get mad about that and tell me I shouldn't care about what they all thought. Anyway, it got worse and worse. I was crying pretty much every night. after I would get off the phone with him, and I would have to pick up because otherwise he would text and text or call and call until I picked up. My roommate realized that this was not good. She went to talk to Benneth Jones, Dr. Bob's wife, who has since passed away. She counseled with me. She was very to me at that time, and she told me that I described a little of what had been going on, and she said, "This is an abusive relationship. You need to get out." And I said, "I can't break up with him because he'll just manipulate me back in to the relationship." And so she told me that I should have my father call him and tell him it was over. He was coming to campus with his grandfather was driving him to campus to pick me up. And my parents were coming to pick me up. And so I told my parents what was going on, and my mom said, "I'm going to tell him." They had me go into my dorm room, and my mom told him it was over. He demanded to speak to me. He said, "This is between me and Elizabeth. I need to talk to her." And my mom said, "No." The chancellor's wife said that you couldn't see her ever again. And then finally he just said, "F you." And they drove off.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But I'm glad you were able to get out of that situation. And I'm glad that Bennett Jones was able to recognize it was an abusive relationship. But like, what was that impact on your mental health from that situation?
So it really affected me deeply. That whole summer, I was really struggling because this relationship was relatively short, but it happened very quickly and got really deep. There was a trauma bond that had formed between us. So that was just all of a sudden broken. I hadn't been able to tell him that I wanted to break up with him. It was all just kind of done for me. And so, in a way, it did feel like my voice was taken. I was just trying to get my voice back. I was really struggling, and I still remember my parents. At first, my mom was very understanding, kind of, but eventually it was like, "You've broken up now, you're free of him, you should be thankful that you're free of him." And I don't want to hear about it, was kind of the thing. Or, yeah.
It's not that simple when it's over. There's trauma that comes from that. There are a bunch of complicated feelings that come with that loss of the relationship that need to be processed and understood. But it sounds like you were not allowed to have that. So going into Bob Jones after that breakup, how was your mental health then?
So I remember when I started, it was that kind of distracted me, just starting back again. But pretty quickly, it was like it started to dawn on me again. I'm not with this guy anymore. Things have changed a lot because of everything that I went through, and nobody understands. The way that a lot of people would react was this was just a normal, you had a boyfriend and you broke up. But that wasn't how it was. I was in a very dark place. I became very depressed. I would cry pretty much every day. I know my friends were worried about me, but there were a lot of people that just kind of were like, "Why are you not over this? You need to get over it." It was kind of that mentality.
And I know you ended up having a meeting with the assistant dean of women at the time. Was that because of this situation?
Yeah,
Okay, if you're comfortable sharing that experience.
sure. One of my friends suggested I counsel with the assistant dean of women. I told her a little bit about what happened, but I was smart enough not to divulge too much. Her response was basically that I needed to read the Bible more, memorize verses, pray more, and it would be okay. That was the answer, was like, just trust God more and read the Bible more and serve others. And and make sure that you've learned something from this experience. And I kind of just told her what she wanted to hear. I've always been very much a people pleaser, so I would figure out what they want to hear me say and then repeat that back to them. I did that with her. I just remember being so relieved that I didn't get in trouble because I knew I had done things I could have probably gotten kicked out for. They weren't bad things, they were just your normal holding hands, cuddling, very innocent. But at the time, I felt so guilty. I was like, wow, I'm so glad I didn't get in trouble. No demerits for that. Oh, thank goodness.
Really sad that you're seeking help and you walk away feeling like, oh, I'm glad I'm not in trouble. That's one of the many issues with the Bob Jones discipline / counseling area. It's talked about in the Grace Report how it was very problematic how they had those two together, the discipline and I say counseling in air quotes for anyone listening, like major, so many air quotes, because there's that fear that you have of being found out for things that aren't even bad at all, just for normal human experiences that Bob Jones does not want people to have at all. But yeah, I'm so sorry that you were not given the support that you needed. So when you went away from that, doing what you could to go away from that situation, trying not to get into trouble, what was your mental health after that?
It just got worse. It didn't help anything. I got to the point where my roommates were concerned about me and thought that I should talk to someone. I was also the room leader, so I had the spiritual responsibility over them. I remember, I don't exactly who it was. It was either a prayer captain, because she was in the room next to us, I think. She wanted to counsel with me, and I'm pretty sure she would have been a lot kinder. But our dorm supervisor was like, no, I'm going to counsel with her. So I went to her. I told her a little bit. As I was talking, she just kept saying, interrupting me as I'm talking. And I'm just like, I don't think you really want to hear what I have to say. But then at the end of that, she said very similar things, except that she added on that since I was a room leader, it was my responsibility to be taking care of my roommates. And so you need to be not, you need to not be selfish and think about others, and that will help you get over all of this.
And it's sad because this is sadly in other religious belief systems too. There is this belief that all human suffering is from selfishness. That is an assumption on fundamentalism. In certain circumstances, I can see that, but things aren't black and white. It's not helpful to say to someone, oh, you're just being selfish. There are different reasons for suffering. There's not one thing. And some of it, like with mental health issues, it is genetic. And there's also trauma involved in so many other things. And there are triggers that come up. And you're also in a very traumatizing, high control environment that's not helping at all. And you're just struggling with the culture. So I'm so sorry that she just said to you, you're suffering, and she's just telling you you're selfish. So oh gosh, it's just, oh my God, I cannot with Bob Jones. But anyways, how are you feeling right now?
I'm okay. Yeah.
Okay.
I did want to mention there was one other, I believe it would have been, I don't remember all of the terms that they had for their student dorm hierarchy, but it was one of those people who's basically a fellow student, supposed to, spiritually counseling me. And it was during the high school festival when all the high schoolers would come and stay in the dorms. I told her that the other day that I had been crying, and it got to the point where I was sobbing and I could not stop it. And she said, I hope you're not doing that while the high schoolers are here. Hope you're not continuing to cry so loudly when the high schoolers are here.
Oh my gosh, that's horrible. So she was so worried about what the high schoolers would think of Bob Jones if they heard you. Because I know when the high schoolers are there, they try to make it seem like perfect. Nothing goes wrong. Even the food completely changes that week, like to better quality. Bob Jones in general is always about the reputation. What was your response to her when she said that to you?
I realized that she didn't really care. Every time I would have an interaction like this with people who were supposed to be spiritual leaders in some way, it was like, you don't really care about what I'm going through. It doesn't matter to you. And you certainly don't understand. You don't have any comprehension of what it's like. No empathy.
Did you have interactions with any other leaders regarding your mental health?
By then, I realized that trying to counsel with anyone there was just not going to happen. It was really talking to
Mm.
good friends who cared about me that helped start the healing process. I had one friend who I just remember sat down with me in an empty dorm room. She just listened, and it was like the first time anyone had actually listened without being prepared to say something. It just like heard what I had to say. And it was like, wow, this is a thing that people do. They listen
Yeah.
to.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. You really connect that feeling seen, heard, and understood. I remember when experienced that feeling right before I got kicked out of Bob Jones. It is something you're sadly denied in fundamentalism. You're not really a human being to be cared for. You're just this project. You're not seeing your humanity at all. And it causes so much harm. They come up with these prescriptive sayings or verses. Healing cannot come from that, and connection cannot come from that. But I'm so glad you were able to finally get that, because it's a breath of fresh air, and we need that as human beings. We need that so desperately. And that was something that I too was so much lacking at Bob Jones University. But I know when we had talked, there was another experience regarding around mental health, specifically with, I think his name is Mazak, speaking in
Yes.
chapel, if you're comfortable sharing that.
Yeah, for sure. So I think that would have been around that time that in chapel Dr. Mazak preached a sermon about mental health and said there's no such thing as mental illness. It's just a spiritual problem or a heart issue. Honestly, at that point, I wasn't surprised because it made sense. Going back to when I was at the academy, my parents and I went to his church for a short time. This was actually before he became the pastor of that church. And I think he was like the youth pastor. So I was in the youth group there for a while. And my mom wanted him to counsel with me because she thought that he would care, that I was struggling. So he came over to our house. I don't even remember what he said, but basically, my mom kind of told him everything about, because that's what she does. She will tell you everything and not hold back. And so he knew all about the mental health stuff. We very quickly realized that he didn't really care. I already knew at that point. I was like, yeah, that doesn't surprise me that he thinks that way because he
Yeah.
doesn't care.
What were the behaviors or his reaction that made you feel like, or even things that he said that make you feel like he did not care?
Not really listening and just immediately being like, here's this verse in the Bible that says, rejoice in the Lord. You should rejoice in the Lord. And it's like, how does that help me? There was no care. At that point, he was my pastor, my youth pastor, but there was no, you're a human being, child who needs help. No, it was just, let me tell you these Bible verses, pray for you, and then leave. And that's it.
And so after hearing that chapel sermon, did you talk to anyone about it, or did anyone else mention anything?
I don't remember. I'm sure that I probably talked with some of my friends about it. I do remember friends being very angry about that. And I think at that point, it was like, I was angry, but I just was like, yeah, that doesn't surprise me. This is what I've experienced my whole time here is they don't care. They don't care if you're a struggling teenager and you have mental health issues. They're going to blame you. When I was 15, 16, 17, I was really, really sweet. And there was no way to blame me, but they found a way, if that makes sense. Like I
Yeah.
was doing everything I could and it wasn't enough.
Yeah, that is one of the main things wrong with that system. You cannot question the prescriptions or the answers they're giving. There's this assumption that they have every single thing right about every single human issue. They have the truth, the answers. They can't be wrong. When you have that kind of approach, that very black and white, totalistic view, I remember from Robert J. Lifton's criteria for thought reform, one of them is doctrine over person. The belief system, the ideology, the answers, whatever, they will always be priority over that person's experience. And they have to fit the person's experience into the ideology instead of just seeing that person and their humanness, the complexity of their situation. It was like they didn't listen. And I'm sure what was going through their minds is, how do I fit this in my ideology? How do I fit this in how I see this? Because with healthy people, when we see something that challenges our own beliefs, and it's like, it's very clear that it juts against that, we're able to healthily shift. Oh, I guess that's not true all the time, or oh, this maybe isn't true like I thought it was, and you shift. But with fundamentalism, there's such this rigid thinking, and it's so sad because there's so much harm. These verses are never meant to be applied to any of these situations at all, period. Like it is just horrible what they have done and what they continue to do, and I'm so sorry that they cause further harm to you. But I am so glad to hear that you had good friends that could give you that support during that dark time for you. But for you and your journey, how have you found healing since leaving Bob Jones?
So I found healing in my friends. After leaving Bob Jones, I met a group of friends from a different school. They adopted me into their little group, and that's how I met my husband. He's been a huge part of my healing experience as well. His family has been so sweet. They welcomed me like a daughter and a granddaughter. I just like making friends outside of Bob Jones. I do have my best friend, and we're still very close. Moving out of my parents' house, having my own house, it's been really helpful. And of course, therapy. I have been doing work with a trauma therapist for about 2 years now, and that's really helped me. So I recommend therapy.
Like, therapy is amazing. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on this show. And I'm so glad to hear that you're on a healing journey and that you have a good support system. Thank you for coming on the show and sharing your mental health journey.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, I loved having you on.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Beyond BJU. My Patreon supporters allow me to do this work, and I am so grateful for them. If you could join my Patreon community, it would be greatly appreciated. But if you feel you cannot do that, if you could give the podcast a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, because this helps other listeners just like you discover the show. Thank you.